Hey guys, Kiwi here. Today I wanted to give my review on the Season 7 premiere of The Walking Dead, The Day Will Come When You Won't Be. So, this episode is definitely the craziest episode of The Walking Dead, no matter how you look at it. The fact that we lost 2 members of the Walking Dead family tonight will burn into the back of the head of fans forever. However you may feel about this episode, you have to admit that it has affected you one way or another. I'm going to be going through the episode chronologically, starting with the right-hand man sneak peek. I was actually pretty surprised that they decided to literally start the episode with it, but the way it ties into this story was actually crafted out perfectly. So Negan brings Rick back into the RV and sticks the hatchet right on the table. He tells Rick that they're gonna go for a little ride and starts making fun of him, saying how he was gonna kill him. Then there's a back and forth between them where Negan taunts him to take a chance for the hatchet, just messing with him pretty much, but Rick accepts. Sadly, he fails. Negan's whole point of what he's doing is to break Rick completely down. He wants Rick horribly scared to the point that he is just completely traumatized and just gone. He wants Rick to know that he is helpless and truly believe it. Rick starts getting brief flashbacks of all of his friends that were in the lineup with Negan, starting first with Rosita and then Glenn, moving on to Sasha, Eugene, Aaron, and Abe, Maggie, Michonne, and Carl. Negan declares that all of these people are his, that Rick is his, that everything he owns is his, including his hatchet. He proceeds to throw the hatchet outside into the fog and demands that Rick fetches it for him. As Rick runs from the zombies in the fog, this has to be one of the most disorientating things I've ever seen. He stumbles everywhere, eventually finding the hatchet and climbing onto the RV, revealing that he was back at the barricade of logs which were set on fire in the finale. During all of this, Rick is realizing what else could happen as it quickly flashes to everyone else who didn't die to Lucille getting hit by her. This honestly proves, in my opinion, that they did film 11 different death scenes. As more taunting from Negan ensues, he states that the idea of Rick's people living happily ever after is just completely unrealistic and it's never gonna happen. Especially not anymore. This is just one of the main things that will stick with Rick for quite some while, as this comes back later in the episode. So at this point, it was the second commercial break, and I was getting a little bit impatient to see the Lucille madness as she goes nuts. The show creators really seemed to stretch out the mystery and suspense for as long as they possibly could. Finally, we get the final flashback to what we've all been waiting for, and as an added bonus, it all comes from Rick's perspective. They make us relive this horrific countdown again, but from Rick's eyes this time, and honestly, that refreshes it in my mind and rebuilds up the momentum. Since they've waited so far into the episode already, I feel like it was definitely acceptable for them to rebuild the emotions and anxiety of the lineup, especially considering it is Rick's perspective of the situation. I'm sure everyone was shaking at this point, not the people in the show, I mean the fans, and as Negan chooses Abe and starts reciting the final lines from the Season 6 finale, we know what's up, we know it's about to happen. And you could just never be ready for this. As Abe gets hit once, he takes it like a champ and tells Negan to bluntly suck his nuts. Good job, Abraham. Your final words made you more famous than you already were, going out being such a savage and as much of Abraham as possible. Negan laughs at this and continues to strike Abe down into the ground until his head is mush. This whole time, Negan is so overwhelmed with his character, it blends in perfectly with the tragic moment. The way he beats his victims to mush is just complete overkill. Obviously, he cracks jokes beforehand, during, and after he traumatizes everyone, trying to almost sympathize with Rick's group, giving the overall vibe that he doesn't want to do what he's doing, even though he's so cheerful and casual about everything. He even flicks Abe's blood towards Rick's face with Lucille, giving Rick the blood mark on his face that everyone was speculating about, and then he proceeds to mock Rosita with Lucille. Now, Daryl doesn't find Negan's joking very funny and swings at him, landing a decent punch, but just making the situation worse. Daryl let his temper get the best of him at the worst possible time. After watching what just happened and knowing the gravity of the situation, you'd hope that Daryl wouldn't try something as clumsy as that. This was only done for the sole purpose of getting Glenn killed as well. Negan is a man of his word, and he means what he says. The first one was free, the second one isn't. No exceptions. It's way worse to kill an innocent man like Glenn because of Daryl, instead of just killing Daryl himself. It makes such a larger example out of Negan, as Glenn didn't deserve it, and Daryl will feel immense guilt about it for the rest of his life, however long that is. Dwight was so eager to kill him as well right then and there, but Negan decided against it, and instead wants to take Daryl with him now. So then there's Glenn, and although I perfectly accept his fate, he was always my favorite character. I had hoped that he would outlive his comic book counterpart, but sadly, we get to see possibly the worst death of all time, as Glenn gets his famous death from issue 100, and it was replicated perfectly in every way. I have to respect how accurately they represented the chain of events, and how gut-wrenching it was to watch. Having Glenn try to say Maggie's name and tell her that he loves her is the worst thing I've ever seen on this show. Abe getting killed honestly wasn't that brutal at all, but Glenn's was fucking horrific. From his eyeballs popping out to the moans of pain, which by the way go on for what seems like ages until he finally gets hit again. Then we see his fingers twitching at the end as his eyeball lays in the mush that was once his head. I wasn't ready for Glenn's fake-out death under the dumpster, and I wasn't ready for this, and I knew this was coming. I knew it'd probably be Glenn, or at least one of them would be, assuming they do a double death, but I still wanted to deny it. The idea that Glenn has been living on borrowed time really made me love and appreciate the character even more, especially after my most recent run-through of the show. So after that tragic event, the rest of the events start lining up with the beginning of the episode, and we get the right-hand man situation. Flashing to current time, Rick gets saved by and screwed over by Negan a few times here, but Negan's just toying with him as usual. If Nick's strong enough to survive this, good. If not, well, whatever, and it didn't really matter anyways because Rick obviously wasn't deserving of even being leader in the first place. It's true that Rick is lost at this point, but he's still not at the point that Negan wants him to be at. So eventually Rick gets brought back to the group the next morning. As everyone gets guns pointed to their head, Carl gets a belt on his arm along with a mark, while Rick begs Negan, please don't, please not this, which Negan replies, I ain't doing shit, commanding Rick to chop off Carl's arm. Michonne pleads to Negan, trying to reason with him by saying, we understand, but gets cut off by him telling her that she understands, yeah, but Rick doesn't yet. This is the key factor here. Rick needs to understand. He is the leader. His people fall behind him, and Rick understanding is Negan's one and only important goal here. It's how he initiates new people to work for him. He called this day a productive-ass day, and that's because he just obtained a new regular income of supplies and workers. You can tell that Negan definitely gets some sort of egotistical kick for bringing someone with Rick's status down to the point that he has. Negan loves breaking leaders, and half of the things he says to Rick, you can tell he's said before, saying, oh, you probably got so used to being leader that you probably loved it, oh, you were probably addicted to it, couldn't get enough of it, oh, you thought you were top shit. He's told this to many leaders before Rick, I'm sure of it, and he just loves it. He loves meeting a new leader, seeing how confident they are, and telling them that they're nothing, telling them that they are literally less than nothing, and he loves just that breaking factor of getting people in line. Rick honestly reminds me of Reek from Game of Thrones at this point, in the way he's acting. I definitely wouldn't blame Rick for being that worked up at all, but we've never seen that look on Rick's face before. That's what I mean by this. We've never seen him get to that stage of horror and loss and nothingness, and we've seen him after Carl getting shot in Season 2, Lori dying in Season 3, Carl getting his eye shot out in Season 6. We've seen many examples of Rick being at stages we had never seen him before, and this tops all of that. Andrew Lincoln is completely flawless in this episode, and honestly so are rest of the actors. This episode was just so freaking amazing in so many regards. But the truly heartbreaking thing to me that I noticed, above Rick crying like a baby, is Carl accepting his fate, telling his father to do it, to cut his arm off. That got to me a little bit. And so, Negan lets Rick off the hook, stopping him once he's realized that Rick is truly broken and was actually going to do it. As he says, that's the face he wanted to see. That's the level of broken that he felt was required for Rick to fall in line. Negan tells them that he'll be at Alexandria in a week to get his shit, and then exits with the ta-ta line from the comment, completing his segment. The final scene, we start out by sitting there with the survivors as the saviors leave. Rick and the group just sit there shocked, for who knows how long. Maggie finally stands up and causes somewhat of a scene, and honestly thank God, because she's still sick as crap and needs a doctor and someone needs to do something. Maggie wants to do everything on her own, and everyone is respecting her, just begging her to let them help. Rick genuinely says that Glenn and Abe were their family too, and graciously helps recover the bodies. I could not stand to see the group like this. It was another totally heartbreaking moment. And afterwards, it didn't help when Rick had to watch in the rearview mirror as the walker approached and then started to eat the mushy remains of Glenn and Abe. And as icing on the damn cake, a complete circle of soul-crushing satisfaction, we see an alternative timeline where they don't die. Bet you thought you were all gonna grow old together, sitting around a table at Sunday dinner, living happily ever after? No. Doesn't work like that, Rick. In this scene, everyone is dressed up and having that meal, enjoying life and the future it holds for them. We see Judith slightly more grown up sitting beside Carl. Glenn is with his newborn son, Herschel Jr., while Abe is happily with Sasha, who is possibly even pregnant. We'll never get to see that though. We'll never get to see any of it. And I'll have to re-watch this episode a third and fourth time, as I may have missed a few minor details in this episode as it was so traumatizing and intense. Prime example of this happening to me prior is when I first saw Glenn fall under the dumpster. I was half zoned out and in shock for the rest of the episode 603, as I just couldn't believe my eyes. This premiere was one of the most impactful episodes of all time. This marks a completely different era for The Walking Dead. This episode was so hyped to the point that it was actually irritating, as people mostly were predicting the Negan death during the first half of Season 6. When the first half of Season 6 was premiering pretty much exactly a year ago, that's when everyone was happily predicting the Negan deaths, trying to speculate clues and hints that would further elaborate our theories. And honestly, I would have preferred to see maybe Abraham's death in the Season 6 finale, followed by Glenn's death in the Season 7 premiere, because although Abe's final words were epic and everyone on social media is quoting #suckmynuts right now, I do have to admit that Abe's death was kind of shadowed by Glenn's death, which was just the biggest thing ever. We were definitely ready to see this at the end of the last episode. But regardless, I am happy with what they have given us, and I hope that Season 7 just gets better from here. Feel free to let me know in the comments how you guys feel about this overwhelming amount of information that us fans have to consume. Leave a like on the video if you've enjoyed anything I've said today, as I'd really appreciate it. But besides that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, in the next Walking Dead video, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.